So let me set the scene for you. It's about 1 p.m. on Sunday. I'm driving my 17-year-old son back from a program that he did at SMU for a week. It has been raining all day here and there, various parts of the drive. I was managing everything okay. I was actually leaving a charging station in Belmead, Texas, a little north of Waco. I charged up my car. While I was waiting for that, I finished writing the recap for the match from Saturday night, plugged in all the quotes, checked everything, dropped in the photo. All of this remarkably I was able to do thanks to Walmart Wi-Fi because it was a charging station in a Walmart parking lot. And we set out for Austin, trying to get home, trying to do things with my daughter's birthday party. And I'm driving on this little turnaround loop to get back onto 35. And so basically, little turnaround, and to the right of me is a concrete median, a little trapezoidal thing, probably about 8 to 12 inches high, maybe about a foot wide. This will come into play in a second here. And then there's an access road onto the freeway where traffic is coming or when lights are functioning as they are not coming. So there's this access road to the right of me. And combination of, I think, oil and just from the rain, all of a sudden I began to skid and try to do the normal stuff to get out of the skid. I'm not going terribly fast, but it has been raining. It is wet. It is oily. And all of a sudden, my car is skidding out of control. I can't get it back over to the left as I need to keep it in line with this little lane that I'm in. And the car jumps over the median, which is bad for the tires, bad for the axle. Eventually, my left front wheel will completely break from the axle, which is not good. We're spinning across this access road. Luckily, no cars are coming. So, what I'm trying to do though is I'm trying to get it off to the side of the road, but not into the little grassy ditch that is on the other side of the access road. I'm able to steer it into place and work a little bit in the way of a kind of little turn in lane to the access road, but not so much that cars can't get past us. Obviously, we're checking to see if we're fine. We're fine. Obviously, the car will not move. I assessed that pretty quickly, pretty much knew it as I was spinning out of control through the access road, but confirmed that, got a tow truck. It's been a nightmare for the last few days trying to figure things out. Still don't conclusively know if I have a car that will be repairable or if I'm going to have to replace it. But anyway, the main thing, of course, is that we're alive, we're safe, and all of that. But that has been my Sunday. That is what has essentially kicked off Leagues Cup week here for me. I trust that you have had a better go of it this week.
Yeah, you waiting to describe that speaking into a microphone for 4 days, I would say that amount of restraint constitutes an emergency of its own. I'm
Yeah.
glad that you're okay. Glad that everybody
Thank
involved
you.
is okay. Uh,
Yep.
Presumable RIP to the car. Let that not be a metaphor for the week. But yeah, it's a week of a lot of driving and a lot of going here, there, and everywhere. So yeah, maybe we just talk about soccer and focus on the completely non-drama filled part of our week.
It's weird because like right before I had filed the story, was checking Twitter and saw that Joe Biden had dropped out. And people will say when something kind of monumental has happened, do you remember where you were when that happened? And I definitely remember that. Yes, I was in a car that was still mobile for about 15 minutes. So
You'll
there's
always
that.
know that part of I-35 is Biden drop off point. That's it. At least you
Exactly.
have a name
Like,
for the place, at least.
like
Biden's
something.
improvised off ramp. That's it.
But again, I know that you've been traveling a lot, so you never think, oh, something's going to happen to me. But then when it does, I didn't really even
Yeah.
have a life flashing before my eyes kind of moment. I wasn't thinking, oh, this could be it. It was more, oh, okay, this thing's happening and it's bad, and I have to get
Annoying.
this car to a safe place. And
Yeah.
yeah, I knew it would be more than annoying. I knew it would be like fairly disastrous, but I was mission focused at the point to get the car into place where it wasn't going to be in further danger to others and to where we were going to be able to safely exit next to a Burger King. It was weird. Like we were talking to a cop that came by. She ambled by about like 30, 45 minutes later. And there was another car that was just trying to park in a Burger King parking lot, and there was a little concrete median in there, and that driver managed to run up on the concrete median, and all the steam started coming out of the car. So clearly, this is a cursed spot. So this particular stretch of I-35, I think it's exit like 339 or 340. Just,
339. I know that exit. I know that's the if I don't have coffee on me, I guess there's a Starbucks there.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's it. Yeah, exactly. That is the one. But I am here. I'm happy to say, and I have survived to anger Dani Pereira.
Emergency podcast. They did a thing, so we gotta talk about it. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency. Emergency podcast. Shut up, hell yeah, shut up, hell yeah, shut up. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency.
Hey, a hearty hello to you all, and welcome to Emergency Podcast, the Austin FC podcast, where we talk about all the Austin FC emergencies, ones that I have apparently created through tweeting a quote and trying to condense some thoughts into 280 characters, and then, of course, other emergencies that are on the forefront, namely facing two Liga MX teams that are really good. Starting on Friday and Tuesday, we are recording this here on a Thursday evening. Moisés, Chiullán, you are with me, and how are you doing?
I'm good. Good to lead with the grabby sensationalist news of the day that isn't really news as much as it's something for people to talk about. But gosh, you just had to bury that lead with this car accident story. Nobody cares about you, Phil. People just care about the memes. That's all that people want.
I haven't shared the news much, but some people have been very kind and expressed well wishes. And again, essentially thankful that I'm here and that I'm not
Yeah.
dead in a ditch, literally.
I'm exaggerating for effect, but I think it bears mentioning that there is something of an unfortunate theme here where as we discussed on the last
No.
episode, the heightened sensitivity of the time that we are in and the circumstances that the club is in and the club's fortunes and the emotions of the
Oh, yeah.
fan base are such that everything is very much a tinderbox ready to blow at the slightest excuse to. Where,
Yeah, yeah. I
uh,
thought I thought you were going with the ditch metaphor, but yeah, no,
oh,
I
yeah,
see where you're going now. And yeah,
yeah.
people are testy right now. So fans are testy, players are testy, coaches are testy. Yeah, it's understandable. And we're going to get into in a second here just the state of the league and where things are at after the 2-2 draw with Charlotte, which happened on Saturday, which we got to see again. Not maybe quite the result that Austin FC fans wanted or needed, but certainly better than what had happened the last two go rounds.
Do we want to dive into that or do we want to talk more controversy?
Let's dive into that first, and then let's plunge into the thing that I guess we have to talk about, and then we also we'll talk about some other kind of Leagues Cup things. But
Sounds good.
yeah, just the state of the club here in late July. Again, you can debate the merits of Leagues Cup or not. We're not necessarily going to do that here. I have a pretty big preview that I did that I put up on Wednesday that gets into a little bit of the weird history, and again, just where the controversy lies. And again, my position on this, to delve here briefly, is I think the format is interesting. I think the ambition is definitely something showing, but at the same time, dispensing with 110 years of history that the US Open Cup has, even though the product might not necessarily be equivalent, definitely you have so many teams that are involved in Open Cup, and to say that Open Cup is not important, even though it might not necessarily get the numbers that you would maybe want from a tournament of that stature. A lot of that, I think, has maybe more to do with how it's been packaged and how it's been promoted rather than the actual value of the tournament from a historical perspective and in terms of
Mm.
just celebrating everything up and down the American soccer pyramid.
From a data perspective, this iteration of Leagues Cup, because the fun, nerdy trivia fact is that uh, last year was the overhauling of Leagues Cup, or rather, there
Mhm.
was a thing called Leagues Cup that is not the same as this Leagues Cup. And this
Right.
Leagues Cup has a lot more money and attention and all kinds of other stuff crammed into it. This is only the second iteration of it. There are so many takes out there already of our colleague Eric Goodman's feeling that in 1 year Leagues Cup did more for US soccer than 100 years of the Open Cup. And
Did not.
it did not, and I disagree with it. And I would say that the simplest disagreement for me comes from the fact that we have 1 year of data to go from, and it's a ridiculous comparison to make. But hey, that gets the headline, that gets the attention, that gets the clicks, that gets the engagement. What I think is going to be interesting is looking at this as the second year of a competition and seeing, presumably without Messi for the entire thing, at the very least, the earliest stages of it, because
Right.
he is still nursing that injury. Can
It's
Leagues
bad.
Cup stand up on its own, which a lot of people, ourselves included, already have opinions about. And there are folks who are very hardcore and very dedicated to the notion that Leagues Cup is a bad thing. It represents bad things, hyper capitalist things, to which I would say this is a very hyper capitalist league. That if you don't like the hyper capitalist nature of things, I think that's an ongoing problem that a lot of people have with MLS and people who are just getting to know MLS. This is the one single entity professional league of its scale in the United States. And that sets it apart, regardless of what the play on the field is like, regardless of the name brand value of the players. This is very much what we're into in dealing with this league in any respect. So, like you, I'm not here to defend Leagues Cup. I'm not here to stand for Leagues Cup, but I feel like it bears mentioning that there are some people who will definitely take us covering it at all as a stance of its own. But I can't see, regardless of what my personal feelings about Open Cup or what Leagues Cup represents, or the word that there's a $25,000 fine imposed on players for speaking negatively of the competition. I feel like my opinion about all that stuff in the grand scope of covering this team is that Leagues Cup represents some sort of a reset opportunity for this club. What kind of a reset opportunity that is, that's what we're most interested in. I don't think that
Mhm.
either one of us is here to go, oh, Leagues Cup, the greatest thing ever. We definitely have positive things and negative things to say about the way that it rolled out in its first iteration last year, but we are looking at how things bode for the 3 new signings, how developmental players from Austin FC2 that are rostered that hold for laugh, provided Austin gets out of the group stage, how those guys figure in potentially a deep tournament run.
Right.
However unlikely that eventuality may be, these are conversations to be had about the way that this club comes out the other side of it. So if they do have a lengthy break, great. What are those next 9 games going to look like, depending on when they go out, depending on how they go out?
Yeah. And real quick, for something that you said, the rumor about the $25,000 fine for somebody criticizing Leagues Cup, that came from a tweet a couple of days ago. Not exactly sure. I haven't seen this name. I don't know how reputable that is necessarily. It sounds like something that is vaguely plausible, but I don't know that I necessarily want to signal boost that kind of beyond what we've already done before we can confirm that. But it
Yeah.
is certainly something to look at. But let's, before we get a little bit more into Leagues Cup, because I do think that you're raising some valid things, and there are definitely points that we want to get to. Just want to give you a state of where Austin is in the MLS playoff run right now after 25 games that they have played. Obviously, some teams have played a little bit more. Some teams have played less, but everybody's in the same general vicinity, right? So teams have about 8 to 10 games in most cases to do their thing, to determine whether or not they're going to make the playoffs or not. Some teams at the top of the table and at the bottom of the table, you pretty much know where their fortunes lie. I don't think at this point anybody is locked in or anybody is mathematically eliminated, but you can see the writing on the wall. Like, you can pretty much gather that teams like Miami, Columbus, LAFC, RSL will find their way into the playoffs, and teams like San Jose and the Revolution will not. After 25 games, Austin is on 31 points. They are 10th in the Western Conference. They have an 8-10-7 record. There are 9 matches to go. And again, maybe at the start of the season, some of these look like they were going to be relatively easy, but I think the schedule looks a little bit maybe more difficult now than it might have at the start of the season. So I'm going to do these in groups of 3. And again, we're going to delve more into future weeks about what these matchups might mean, and we might do a game by game projection and see where things end up. I know the Suffering from Joy podcast folks are talking about doing something similar, and they were doing a little bit of breakdown on their latest show. I've had a lot of time to drive across the state while my car was still doing its thing, and in a rental car thereafter. So I've gotten a chance to listen to some podcasts over the past week or so. But anyway, so you've got at Nashville, Vancouver, and at Toronto as a block of three. And that at Toronto game maybe looked like that was fairly easy at the start of the season, given where Toronto was in 2023, which was a hot mess, but they are doing much better now. And that seems like a much more tricky game, especially since that is an away game and that is a stadium that Austin has never been to. And then you have at LAFC and then home with Houston and RSL, and then two more road games at Portland and at the Galaxy. And then decision day, it is a match at home against Colorado. Austin has never beaten Colorado in Q2 Stadium, which is weird given where Colorado's been standings wise over the first 3 years of Austin's existence. And that is, I think, going to be a very decisive game. I do have a feeling that Austin is still going to be in the mix as of that game, but what they do results wise will determine, I think, in that game whether or not they're going to make the playoffs. So I do think it's going to come down to that right now, but we'll talk more about that in future weeks. Before we plunge into Leagues Cup a little bit more, just any kind of thoughts from you on the state of the team right now and where that playoff run is?
I think a couple of things that you bring up make me think that something that, as long as I have been a regular fixture on the show with you, that we keep coming back around to is talking about the things that have happened over the last 4 years to the club and the things that have not happened over the last 4 years, having beaten this or that team in Austin Stadium, in their stadium, that sort of thing. We talk about that on a week-to-week basis. And looking at that initial run of 3 games, we've got a case of one of those things that Austin has never done in beating Colorado in Q2. Another place that they've never gone. They've never gone to Toronto and played at TFC. And even though it has come to my attention that a fairly sizable amount of traveling fans are planning to go to that one,
Oh,
that
nice.
doesn't change the fact that TFC's home ground is not the easiest and friendliest atmosphere to go to. Visiting teams enjoy coming to Q2 because they like the energy. They say that they like playing off the energy. I'll cite the fights in the stands between TFC and Montreal supporters, started by many accounts by TFC supporters, as a thing to watch out for. That is a team that has been going through it and whose fan base has been going through it and who are not happy about having gone through it. You mix atmospheres like that. You've got some notable rivalries as we go into that first third of the last 9 games and just look at those 9 games as a whole. And you've got potential for more fireworks. I think that there will be more chaos and speculation if, as many in the fan base are expecting, Austin goes out at the group stage, as many odds makers are expecting, because Pumas and Monterrey are top caliber teams. So even though they are expecting it, there's a lot of challenge ahead. It's not just, oh, here's a thing that Austin's never done that they need to do. It's that there's a series and set of things Austin has never accomplished that they've got to do to make sure that they're above that playoff line, doing the play-in game, let alone safely above the play-in level of making the playoffs.
Yeah. And I feel like they're not going to get seventh or above. I feel like if Austin is making the playoffs, that is that kind of debatable eighth or ninth place zone. And for the record, I think eighth or ninth place is the playoffs. I think if you are playing a game beyond the 34th game, even though it is a 1 game play-in, I feel like you have made the playoffs. If you lose that 8-9 play-in game, not a great accomplishment, right? So you didn't move on to the quote unquote real playoffs. But again, in terms of Rodolfo Borrell and his standard of Austin FC must make the playoffs, then I think if it is eighth or ninth, and especially if Austin loses that 8-9 game, and especially if Austin loses that 8-9 game at Houston, which is not an unrealistic scenario, then I think that you have to question, okay, was this good enough? Is this an acceptable season given the talent level of the team, given the talent infusion? You have to weigh in all those factors. And again, that's something that I feel like we're going to have an opportunity to debate over the next few weeks, because we may not have games to cover necessarily. So with that kind of fumbly segue, let's go into Leagues Cup. Austin
Look,
plays Pumas.
people describe the trudge into Leagues Cup as a fumbly kind of thing, so I think it's appropriate thematically.
Yeah. All of a sudden, hey, here's a month-long tournament. Some of you wanted it, some of you don't. Here it is. All right. Austin is going to host in Q2 Stadium. Again, we still haven't gotten determination. I assume for Friday's match that Austin will have control of their own locker room. I assume for Tuesday they will as well.
That's the understanding. The understanding
Yeah.
I have is that despite them being considered the away side in different cases, if it is happening at Q2, Austin is going to be in its own locker room. And I have to speculate. This isn't based on something I was told. I have to speculate that part of the reasoning for that is that as much benefit and upside as the teams and players have it impressed upon themselves that they need to play nice, I don't think they want to invite the possibility of something hypothetically happening to a home locker room because a visiting side wanted to express their anger after a result that they're not happy with or an interaction with a player that they're not happy with. I think just on a basic trying to avoid things that can be avoided front, I think that it behooves both leagues to be okay with that.
Sure, that makes sense. All right, so Friday, Austin faces Pumas, which is, I believe, 22nd in Leagues Cup seeding based on 2023 values, although Pumas is having a really strong start in their half season out of the gate. And then, of course, CF Monterrey, Rayados, as they are known, second by the seeding. Really incredible team. But a lot of the focus today, obviously, in the press conference was towards the Pumas game, since Pumas also had a coach and a player there per Leagues Cup guidelines. So things are a little bit different. There was a Zoom element to the press conference. A computer was set up where it normally wasn't before. Michelle Sanchez was a Leagues Cup official in a official looking black polo, which we usually don't see at a press conference. So it was good to see Michelle there. It was a little bit different, obviously, to see her in an official capacity in that way, but I thought she did well in terms of managing stuff.
Yeah.
And we talked about some stuff at the press conference. Let's talk about Pumas and how they feel, because you got to hang around and do some translations for us, for all the readers. So just thoughts about what they said and your impressions from them.
So for me, we expected what we would hear from the Austin FC player, from the Austin FC coach. And I felt like going in, I was assuming that we would get something a bit more telling from the Pumas side of things. And indeed, I think that we did, because in one of the leadoff questions about the quality of Austin and what the coach, Gustavo Lema, knows about Austin, he said that he thinks that they're a very well-constructed squad that is very offense-minded, which was pretty surprising, because that's an interesting way to be overly gracious to your hosts. I think that to an extent there is a bit of being overly gracious, and there's also a bit of maybe they are really just focused on the Rayados game. They are more focused on the Monterrey game, and they see tomorrow night as, honestly, a proper warm-up against a team that they have estimated they don't really need to worry about that much. At the same time, they have been out of league play for a little bit, and they are getting back into the swing of things. And they are missing Leo Suarez, who tore his ACL, which is a big deal.
It is a big deal.
The majority of the Spanish-speaking media just kept bringing the guy's name back up to try to get them to say something different than the same three answers they gave about it. He's great, but we've got a great team and we're a big club and everything. I feel like Lema talking the way that he did about Austin, talking in generalities, some of it is just, that's media training. That's what you get out of a coach like that in any of these kinds of conversations. Didn't really get anything terribly useful out of Ulises Rivas. Their captain seemed like a very nice guy, well-spoken, trained, and that kind of thing.
Totally vanilla, right?
Totally vanilla. Nothing really spectacular in either case. And that's, frankly, is that what you or I love? Does it give us something juicy to talk about? Not really. But that's the job that these guys should be doing for what their side is trying to do, which is not say anything particularly spectacular or controversial or anything like that. But I've got a feeling that the impression that I got, that they are looking at the game against Austin tomorrow night as a warm-up. And as I learned, unless I heard something wrong, and it's entirely possible that I got a mixed message here, it sounded like they, as a team, have not worked out on the grounds at St. David's until basically as we are recording this at around 7:30 p.m. Their first training session as a team for this competition in country was the night before the match, which does not say to me that they think that they really need to do much more than warm up and make sure that they don't injure themselves in warm ups going into it.
Can also speak to an inborn advantage that MLS teams have, because oftentimes these Liga MX teams will come to market with relatively few days between when they arrive in the US and when they actually have to play games.
So I'm going to lay what will be an unpopular prediction, which is that Austin pulls out a very surprising win tomorrow night against Pumas. I feel like that's in the cards because Austin has something to prove. They have new players. They have existing players. As I've said before, I'm not a fan of the line that is parroted by many of the players don't really want to win. They're just pleased with the coach. They're just pleased with the results. They're not trying to win. I don't believe that any of those players in any version of the starting 11 or the 18 or the 20 that they have rolled out, that any of those guys don't want to win. But I feel like there is a different kind of fuel in the tank when there's an opportunity to change the face that the fan base is seeing, change the face that the league is seeing, change the way that the world is looking at these guys. This is football. None of these guys are under illusions that they are going to be with Austin the entire rest of their career, except for the guys that are in the process of their retirement phase, maybe. These are guys who are very focused on keeping their market value where they want it to be, where they need it to be, going into the next phase of their career as they look at potential transfers to other places, looking at contract renegotiations and re-ups where they are, if they're happy here, if they got a family and they feel good and stable and secure here. I feel like this is, in a season of inflection points, a unique one because they have a fuller roster than they have had all season, not just because of the expanded roster number allowed by the cup competition. I think that knowing that Alonso Ramirez impressed his first team teammates as well as he did in his call-ups, to Jassy Zardes' point, dropped in like he had been training with the first team the whole time and is a first teamer. These are quality players who I think are looking at this as an opportunity to reset the trip meter.
With that in mind, I think that's all we really need to say about game state things. Obviously, I think Monterrey provides a bigger challenge. I'm not as optimistic as you. I personally think that both Pumas and Monterrey have so much talent. And I think that Austin is also in such a weird place that I do feel like this is a 2-and-out. That's not necessarily my hope. It would be fun to have some more games here, and I think it would do some wonders for Verde's confidence to get into the knockout rounds and to charge forth and get to play some of these other teams. And again, it's weird because, again, also last year, Austin FC faced two Mexican teams and did not get results for either of those games and ended up getting knocked out of the competition. So they have not been to the knockout round, and they have not actually played another MLS team in this competition. We have a very small sample size, of course, but if things go as people predict, then we might end up with kind of a similar scenario again. And again, we don't know what exactly is going to happen in 25 and especially 26 with Leagues Cup, although we might assume, based on what Don Garber said, that this is something that they're very invested in, that this is something that is a multi-year commitment and they're going to keep it rolling. But again, got a lot of questions about where that's going to be after this year. And again, if it's going to compare to last year and the kind of messy fueled ratings that they got. And of course, a lot of really incredible, spectacular, weird games that happened in those knockout rounds.
You just made me think of something. I wanted to tag something about causality onto this, which is about the Monterrey game. I don't have high hopes for that one. I cannot see Austin winning that one. But what would change my mind is a result against Pumas. And I think that's literally the hope. That Tuesday game ends up going better than everyone expects. I mean, it was, you look at the group that Man City had in the Champions League last December, and you're like, Man City's obviously going to top that group. That's literally going to happen. And good luck to Red Star Belgrade. They don't stand a chance. And sure enough, they didn't. You show glimmers of hope, and that does a lot to convince the people on the pitch that they are indeed supermen with superpowers. The concept of Austin making it out of the group relies entirely on them getting a result against Pumas. I would be shocked if they have a drubbing against Pumas and somehow make it out of the group based on how they do against Monterrey and the way that Monterrey Pumas goes. I
Yeah.
feel like that causality is very much in play, and we'll see within about 24 hours how that goes.
Yeah, Wolf did talk about looking to get at least one win to be able to advance out of the group. So I imagine that looking at just where the teams are and how the talent levels match up, and especially with Suarez with the injury, if there's a win to be had, it's probably Friday.
I'll tell you what, I love a narrative, and a fascinating narrative would be Austin pulling out wins in both games. I don't see that as possible, but I see the first win as plausible. And we'll find out.
Yep. All right. I guess we got to talk about Dani Pereira, who voiced his displeasure with me and then blocked me on Twitter after things went down at the press conference this morning. And yeah, I just want to preface this by saying that occasionally when things do catch my ear at press conferences, if there are things that I feel are germane to stories that are happening, be it with team performance or other kinds of things, like again with Leagues Cup, with this fan boycott that's taking place not just in Austin but in other cities, then I do sometimes take time out from the press conference while I'm still recording, while I'm still listening to what's going on, and I will tweet something out. What I guess I'll do, I'll work backwards on this and talk about what actually happened in real time and then what I sent out. Not to justify necessarily, I don't think that's quite the right word, but just to maybe give a little bit further clarification of what I heard, what I interpreted, and what I shared out, and then just the differing opinions that I have heard about how that was characterized. And again, we are trying to, I think a lot of us, definitely me, I am trying to do my best in these situations to interpret on the fly, to capture nuance, to get intonations about certain things as well as what is being said, and then also in the historical context of what's been said before, not just by the person himself. In most cases it's going to be himself in Austin FC land, but then also what other players have said, what the coach has said, things like that. I asked Dani about the just kind of notion about home field advantage, right? Because again, there is this news that Austin Anthem is going to officially protest. They are officially boycotting the tournament. Los Verdes also issued a statement which didn't call for a boycott, but there are Los Verdes members out there that have said that I will not go, or I'll go, but I won't buy concessions. There are various ways that people are voicing their displeasure. And of course, a lot of this has to do, and you can read about this a little bit more in Wednesday's piece, but a lot of you already know the story, right? So Open Cup, Austin FC did not send their first team this year. That was not by choice. That was a league mandated thing where they only allowed certain teams to send a first team. Otherwise, for other teams that were below a certain performance level in 23, their next pro team represented the club. And the perception is that in particular, MLS Commissioner Don Garber is trying to essentially deal with the schedule congestion concerns that players have voiced, that fans I think have certainly voiced in on behalf of the players, by allowing a full Leagues Cup to run and then winnowing down the number of games that MLS players will play in Open Cup. The fan boycotts that are happening here and elsewhere are directly related to that. So I asked Dani Pereira about the boycotts. He didn't know what I was talking about, so I tried to briefly explain that. And again, it's very convoluted. I was trying to explain to my wife last night, and she gave up after around 30 seconds.
It's the kind of boycott that there is the actions of this person are the reason we are boycott the Cecilia Dominguez boycott, for example. And then there's one like this that requires a layer of explanation, where it's, so this boycott is of this event because the way that the league that masterminded this event is treating this other competition that people care about for certain reasons. So that there's a certain amount of backstory and lore that you have to get into.
What compounded it further was I was doing this during the All-Star game. So my wife's, wait a minute, are we watching an Open Cup game or a Leagues Cup game right now? I'm like, we're watching the All-Star game. She's like, what is this? And again, to someone who doesn't follow soccer much, it's very confusing. And the kind of visceral reaction that some might have is, why are there all these games and what are they doing and what
Well,
is their purpose? What
and
do they mean?
initially, to what you were just getting into, Danny had to have it explained to him, wasn't aware of the controversy,
Right. Which I
had to,
thought was notable in
yeah.
itself.
And I think, I mean, it's notable, and I think a piece of it is some people react with a surprise that how could he not know? He plays for the team, and I feel like they play in so many different competitions that are overlapping.
Hmm.
I'm sure that he knew about this 3 months ago, but
Hmm.
man, that was 3 months ago, and he's played a lot of soccer, and he's got national call ups that he's doing, and he's got this and he's got that. And he might have been aware of it, but these guys don't obsess over the details the way that the sickos that follow the sport do.
Sure. So what Danny said once we established what this was exactly is, I don't see why they're upset. I don't know what you want me to say to the fans. I hope they're out there like they always are. I say every time that I get interviewed, they're one more for us. And so far, that sounds like kind of boilerplate standard. First of all, initially perplexed about fans being upset, fans boycotting, which I guess if you're not really following it, that is understandable. And then standard fare about saying that the fans are great, because what else would you say as a player? Even for somebody who is not a media trained soccer player, to acknowledge the fans and say the fans are great, especially Austin's fans who are objectively great, then that's something that I think is standard fare. That doesn't surprise me. But then he said, hopefully the real ones come. I hope they know they're a big part of this, not just our team and the players, but also part of what we are. And what really stuck out to me in that was that word real and the use of real. And you can determine, okay, was he saying like real ones? To me, the ones was substituting for fans, and the real was a kind of curious distinction. And again, this is feeding into some of the debates, right? So, this kind of idea of you support the team no matter what, in whatever situation. And this is something that various supporters groups around the country, not just here, have been grappling with. Like Sons of Ben, for example, in Philadelphia, they're planning a walkout. They're going to be there for the first 20 minutes. They have a traditional song that they sing around that point. I believe it's Four Leaf Clover at the 2010 mark, which has to do with when the team first started. And then basically they're going to abandon the capo stands and are essentially saying, if you want to come join us in a walkout, or if you just want to sit silently, not wave your flags, however you want to express your discontent about the situation at this point, you can do that. So in Austin's case, it sounds like some people are going to stay away. And again, not everybody necessarily in Austin Anthem is going to follow that Austin Anthem Council, but they're asserting that they're not going to have an official role in the stadium, and that's how they're playing it. And so to me, when he talked about that, that was curious, and that's what I tweeted out. So my summary of it, which I thought was, again, if I didn't think this was fair, I wouldn't have tweeted it out. Dani Pereira was unaware of Austin fan protests over Leagues Cup, hopes the real fans turn out to support the team. And so there's been a little bit of scuttlebutt. Danny didn't think he was fairly represented in that. And if that's the case, I feel badly about that. But again, I do not at the same time think that what I was doing was mischaracterizing
Yeah.
what he had said.
It seems that to an extent, some of what I've pushed back on personally, people accusing you of, is what a different outlet was accused of doing the other week about Alex Ring.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And the roles are reversed in this situation where it's, oh, we are Austin, put out this thing that perfectly contextualized what Danny said. And Phil,
Mm-hmm.
what you tweeted live from a press conference as it was still going on, it should have lent exactly that level of context and exactly that level of detail. Do better. However, the complaint is frequently that we are not throwing this information out there quickly enough for some of these exact same people's pleasure. So it's a matter of some of the people that are the most heated about this and that have gone after you for this, who aren't Dani Pereira,
Mm-hmm.
are people accusing you of something that you very plainly were not involved in doing a week and a half ago. And there are variables at play where, you know, I'm sure that there are people who do not love you as much as they love other outlets. And there are people who, as much as they might like Alex Ring, don't like him as much as
Mm-hmm.
Danny is among the fan base. Danny is beloved among the fan base. His family is beloved among the fan base. And there's a
Mm-hmm.
certain defensiveness that comes to Danny himself. And
Sure.
I think it is reasonable and appropriate for you to feel bad that a player perceived you as trying to intentionally take them out of context for the sake of engagement or something that we have both talked publicly and cloaking the names in anonymity about other people specifically trying to engineer. And I think I think it is reasonable to check yourself on, wait, did I get this wrong? The
Right.
key difference, and the thing that has actually bugged me the most, is having a lot of white people tell me what colloquial slang differences are when it comes to
Sure.
real ones versus real fans. And there is a difference. There is 1000% a difference. In terms of what Danny was saying, there is little to no difference except for the way that a white person would take those two different terms. And so looking at it through that lens, sure, somebody who did not grow up speaking with the same kind of colloquial slang that this guy does, being defensive in that player's favor, yeah, I feel like they're going a little bit overboard in trying to make an accusation of, but only I, the street slang whisperer, can properly interpret just how wrong Phil got this and what a terrible attack on Dani Pereira and his character this is, thereby complicating and throwing accelerant on something that should have never gotten set on fire in the first place. So, as
Right.
I have said to a number of people, that the implication from Danny I see as would have been the same, whether he said one thing or the other. He did say real ones, not real fans. But you and I both know what the audio, the glorious, perfect audio setup is for these press conferences.
I heard real ones, but I took ones to mean as a synonym for fans in that context. And had he just said, instead of real ones, had he just said, I hope the fans turn out to support the team, and real wasn't used as a kind of qualifier there, then I would have registered that as a pretty vanilla quote, right?
The
Go ahead.
implication of real ones being like your homies, your like your close pals. That's, if anything, it is more of an implication of the people who are actually close to me and know me, and that's where I see the circling of the wagons from the people who see
Right.
themselves as the sickest of the sickos comes from.
Yeah, I don't see real ones as connoting 20,000 fans in the audience, many of whom I have never met before. I mean,
Yeah,
check me if I'm
and
wrong there.
here's the thing: is like the difference between the terms. There is a
Mhm.
difference in terms of
Mhm.
the words coming out of Danny's mouth. The implication of either term being used doesn't change the fact that what he was implying was nothing sensational. And when the
Mhm.
fan base goes, oh, we're going to wildly overreact to the term real fans, and then they
Mhm.
turn their guns at you, and Danny has said absolutely nothing askance about people who are boycotting, who he doesn't understand why they're boycotting, and says something positive and nice about the people who really care the most. So, if anything, it feels to me like deflection of, they do not want their fave to be saying something that could remotely be perceived as anything whatsoever negative toward them. So therefore,
Mhm.
Phil, it is your fault, and it lays at your feet, and this is character assassination, and you should be brought up on charges and tried in The Hague, because that's the media's role in this. It's all our fault. We're everybody's enemy. It is an easy thing to brush things off as. I don't think that
Mhm.
whether he had said real fans or real ones, I don't feel like in either case the overreaction from folks was necessarily accurate to what Danny was trying to get across. And
Mhm.
it is a situation of everybody being keyed up to 11 and ready to blow at a moment's notice.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what this kind of uncovers, yeah. And again, just to clarify one more thing about my coverage, and then I want to get a little bit more into just where I think fan energy is right now, is yeah, within 3 hours of being at the press conference, I had a full story up on the site, and it's in front of the paywall. Everybody can see it. Everybody can see the strength of what I do as a journalist. I have quotes in there. I provide context. I aim to be measured and controlled in the presentation and factual, but at the same time give some color and give some dynamism. And I believe that I did that in this article, no different from a lot of the articles that I have done week after week, year after year, both on the Substack and on earlier publications that I've worked on that cover Austin FC. Again, if you want to look at that and see it in context of the whole story, you'll see that's ultimately what I'm about. When I have 280 characters and I'm trying to combine things into that, sometimes it can be challenging. Is it ill-advised that I did that? I don't think so necessarily, because I am
Yeah.
trying to share information on the fly, but maybe I am a little more gun shy about doing that on the
I
road.
look, I'll straight up say it, and you know as well as anybody listening who knows me very well, I don't care who I piss off saying this. There's some people that you will never be able to please enough, who will always treat other outlets completely differently than they will you, because you're not their fave and this other one is. And
Mhm.
there is stuff that they're just never going to be ready to give you the benefit of the doubt for, no matter how good your work might be.
Yeah. So I'm loath to be the subject of this. So I feel like I had to address this to a degree, but also I think what this is also uncovering is that there is a real kind of unease about Leagues Cup and what it is and what it represents. And that whereas obviously the regular season, the goal of the playoffs, that's unifying. Fans get behind that. Certainly there are differences of opinion of who should play, who should coach, things like that. But there's not a kind of question about the regular season, right? So it is the reason that we're all here. It's the reason that we care. It's the reason that we're concerned about this and go to games and cheer and look at the standings and fret when things are not looking good and the team's below the playoff line, and feel good, maybe cautiously good in some cases, when the team's above the playoff line, as it has been for a good stretch of the season. But I think with Leagues Cup, just because there is so much unsettlement around it just as a competition, as a concept, I do think that there is just uneasiness about it, and there's not a unified kind of perspective on how to be. There are some people who think, oh yeah, let's root for the team, let's hope they do well because it's a competition and they're in it. And there are some people who are thinking these are two really good Liga MX teams, and if we check out early, there will be more time to rest and recoup and reset and heal up little aches and pains that some of the players have that we've been talking about. And there's definitely different kind of mindsets on that. In some cases you feel like, oh, that's too much rest. That's not good. That's not good for players. They need to be in a rhythm, versus this idea of if you're playing a lot and it's games that are mounting and it's in the heat of August, then that wears on teams. And you look at teams like Miami and Nashville last year that had deep as you can go with a Leagues Cup run, and how the rest of the season and the playoffs went for them. Just looking at Anthem and Los Verdes and what they did in terms of their statements, I think there's even a disagreement on what is the best way to protest this? What is the best show of discontent over maybe not the tournament itself, though I think for some people it is that, but this kind of idea that it is supplanting Open Cup purposefully, and Open Cup is something that is sacred.
I don't know. I feel like it's something that people are still figuring out as an overall audience. It's only the second
Mhm.
year. We'll see. And there are plenty of people who think that it's disreputable and terrible to give it any air. But here we are covering the team. We can't help it.
I was even talking to some folks a little while ago today about, including Tony, actually, from Austin Anthem, about maybe you do something where if you do Leagues Cup in future years, you divide it. You have the group stages happen at one portion of the season for a week or 10 days, and then you just winnow down to like maybe the top 16 teams. And then in that, you maybe get, again, if there is a Mexican team that is higher seeded, you allow them to host there and have the game happen there. So maybe there's a way where it's not just this month-long slog in the hottest part of the year that interrupts the season, because again, for a lot of these teams, they're going to go 2 and out, and then they're going to sit idly by and try to, in some cases, feign interest about other teams for a few weeks. And then all of a sudden, late August, up, season starts again. And it's this push to the playoffs. And it can feel like the momentum is thwarted,
Well,
especially if you do go two and
yeah.
out. And this idea of, oh, yeah, we lost these games. We're going to hang out for 3 weeks and then it's back again. We might make the playoffs. We might not.
The other thing that comes to mind as you're saying this is timing.
Mhm.
And there are a lot of assumptions that I see made among the American fan bases of these clubs, which are, where and when all of these Mexican teams want the games to be played. And certainly there were public statements made by owners of different clubs about all the travel and how grueling it was that is on the record. But the other part of it is Liga MX, they run 2 seasons and it's
Mhm.
closer to the European schedule. So their
Right.
schedule lines up such that they are getting ready to start their next proper season again on the other side of when League's Cup is.
They're actually a few games into that new season and have to interrupt it for this, which is even
Yeah.
worse.
In the original conception of it, it was that they would do this and then they would start their season, but then dates didn't line up. So they just shifted things
Right,
by a
right.
few weeks and that made it more complicated like this. So
Mhm.
even as it stands, some of the original reasoning for this didn't end up working out. So why is it still like this? Is the money that good? I don't know. And if you chop it up and say, have it start, you know, early in the MLS season, then you're
Mhm.
heading into the last run of the second half of the Liga MX season. So, do they want to be playing the opening rounds of a cup competition as they are trying to finish their league season?
Or you might be able to time it to where as soon as their playoffs end, then they're jumping into just another week to 10 days of group stages in Leagues Cup. Is that fair to those teams either?
Yeah. And then you've got various players that play in international cup competitions that
Mhm.
already have typically summer dates to them. The Euros
Yeah.
and Copa America aren't every year, but the year that they aren't playing, something else is playing. Club World Cup is
Right,
next year.
right.
There's always going to be some international cup competition that is breaking up schedule. The variable that I think gets missed in a lot of these conversations that you and I and loads of other people have been having is that this is two different leagues, and the people who pay a lot more attention to one of the leagues than the other league might be making assumptions about what that league and what those players and what those clubs would definitely want that maybe doesn't actually match up with reality. If the benefit of having actual home field advantage is something that matters a lot to those Liga MX teams, are there things that they would be willing to budge on that would make it possible to break up the overall competition? Maybe, but if MLS is the one controlling most of the purse strings here and they want it to be a World Cup style competition, as we have heard them, advertise it and put it in the mouths of their
Sure.
commentators over and over,
Yeah.
they are not open to that version of it at all, as much more
Mhm.
practical sense as it might make from an event planning standpoint. The other thing, and like I want to bring this back up, even though you mentioned earlier, a desire to not give it more air than necessary.
Mhm.
The $25,000 fine thing, rumor though it may be, that people
Mhm.
find it as plausible as it is because of how tightly MLS as a league tries to control communication and commentary and conversation about it. I think that speaks to something itself, that people find that
Mhm.
plausible, not just within a club like Austin that went out in the group stage last year, is not projected as very likely to make it out of the group stage this year, but across the league, fan bases from different MLS clubs are going, yeah, that seems completely believable based on the way that the league has interacted with supporters groups, and tried to toe a very stark party line about how Leagues Cup is the greatest
Mhm.
idea ever and it brings in gigantic audiences. Meanwhile, you look at some of those incredibly empty stadiums, and not just for Liga MX team versus Liga MX team that isn't Tigres or Pumas or Club America or
Right.
Rayados
Yeah,
or
yeah.
whoever. This is a developing contest that
Mhm.
needs to find its footing and needs to figure out how it is going to recapture the people that are otherwise MLS sickos to the core that go to plenty of games in person, buy tons of merch, watch every game that they don't go to in person on MLS Season
Mhm.
Pass. There's a lot of unwritten stuff that will dictate how this is seen, and I think we're going to start getting some of the data that we need from this second playing of it.
I think really, yeah, the main things, the kind of questions are, do all the teams really need to be involved? And then do there need to be as many games as there are? And
Yeah.
can you still have something that's meaningful and fun and brings, again, and the goal, and it's hard to engineer this necessarily. They did it when it was an exhibition in its inception, but that's not what they want. They want this to be a competition. But at the same time, can you get those marquee League MX versus MLS matchups that they want? And there's no real guarantee of that. Again, even last year, a lot of really fantastic matches happened. A lot of really good teams were in there. And at the end, it was two MLS teams. It was Miami, Nashville. And I believe you only had one team, League MX team that was in the semis, if I'm remembering this right.
Uh-huh.
So again, just this idea of, yeah, we want to have this be two league competition, but in the end, if it becomes League MX versus League MX, or if it's MLS versus MLS, it just doesn't have the same sort of cachet. We're not going to fix League Cup
No.
in the stretch of this podcast here. So we're going to leave that be. You
I
have
do have
a,
one
okay,
thing to leave us with. Something
gotcha.
that has become apparent from Spanish language commentary. Fox Deportes
Mhm.
was running something that was on the TV as we were waiting to be taken back. Their closing thought on a show this morning was asking the question of does Liga MX have an obligation to win Leagues Cup this year? And
Yep.
the big conversation surrounding that general talking point is
Mhm.
Liga MX fans are not happy with the way that they went out last year, not just only
Yeah.
one team getting to the semis. As a league, as various clubs, they are taking it more seriously this year, and that should absolutely terrify the MLS teams. And it
Yeah,
would be
because one of the graphics
fascinating.
they had is what teams went out by round. I think most of the teams, I think like seven of the teams went out in the round of 16. So it's definitely something that they're measuring.
I think it'll be interesting to see if we have a much more even number of Liga MX and MLS teams going into the final rounds,
Mhm.
or a heavily Liga MX dominant playoff structure for the Cup. It would be fascinating for there to be one MLS team left in the quarterfinals, which may not be mathematically possible. But
I'm
eh,
not sure that it is. Yeah.
tell you what,
So
when the Liga MX teams take something more seriously, that is a thing to be feared.
we're going to leave it there. We do want to do one quick Olympics related thing, and I want to express my utter perplexity over the Canadian women's drone situation and Bev Priestman, the head coach for the Canadian women, being dismissed, removed herself from coaching the team against New Zealand, and then is not going to be there the rest of the way. Canada did win though, so I guess the accusations were that the drone was spying on the New Zealand women's team, and perhaps that worked to a degree. I don't know.
And there's an article from TSN that alleges, according to sources, that attempted spying for both the men's and women's Canadian national teams has been a thing that has been a focus for years. So this is a just unfolding kind of thing. And I wonder if we might see a raft of loose lips getting looser around other leagues and around leagues rather than national competitions or even other national teams, and suspicions and allegations of other teams trying to use drones and other spying devices to try to get enhanced footage of their competitors.
Or, of course, if this is just a Canadian phenomenon.
They burned down the White House that time. Can't trust the Canadians.
I was what?
Phil, there's your history.
I thought it was. I thought it was the British. Are you
No,
saying? Are you
Canadians.
saying Canada's good name? Okay.
No, I'm not sullying Canada's good name. It's something that many Canadians are very proud of, actually. What do you think "we stand on guard for thee" means? They
Oh
stand
my
on guard for
goodness.
the Canadian reputation. They'll burn stuff down if they have to. So yeah,
Wow.
we can fact check me between now and next week.
Okay, we'll do that. All right, we're gonna leave that here again. Thanks for all of you who are listening, and of course those of you who subscribe and support the Verde All Day work. And again, just as a kind of footnote to the stuff we were talking earlier, we try our best. I'm very grateful to the subscribers for supporting this, but it is a lot of work, and we're doing this kind of juggling a lot of other things, especially given the week that I've had in the summer that I've had and my family has had. It's crazy. It's hard to do all this stuff. And again, like the goal is to just be as forthright as possible. So again, we'll continue to endeavor to do that as I do. And again, I want to just again emphasize that we are narrative in. We do not try to be part of the narrative and trying to tell the story of the season. And when things jump out and we feel like they merit instant sharing, the impulse is to instantly share. But you should also know that we are not just people who sit around and tweet. We're actually asking questions, writing articles, things of that nature. We are trying to provide full context around everything and not just necessarily the sound bites that make their way around in the grand game of telephone that is soccer fandom sometimes. Or, as my wife was saying when I was explaining the situation today, soccer is so drama. And a lot of times that's really true.
Well said. So we'll see if we can make that Phil West, Dani Pereira peace conference happen.
Okay. We'll see what happens. One day at a time, I guess. We'll encounter each other Friday and we'll see what happens.
Try some soccer diplomacy.
Okay, we will do that. All right. Have a good week, everybody, and enjoy Leagues Cup if you celebrate. And if you are staying back, I completely understand that position. And we will see you next week.
Where's Phil? He usually starts this off.
He's teaching in San Antonio today. Colby, go ahead and start us off.